Hello, this is Inny Świat podcast, Another World. I'm speaking in English, so you already know that today we are having a special guest and we are going to have this episode in English. And I'm very happy to introduce and to welcome to our podcast Nel Bonilla. Hello.
Yes, hello, and bardzo dziękuję za zaproszenie. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, as you see, well, we almost could have talked in Polish, but since my Italian is worse than your Polish, we are deciding to do it in English. Mm-hmm. Nel is a PhD candidate specializing in migration, sociology, social geography, and conflict studies, working, actually finishing PhD on organized violence and migration. But she also is incredibly an author of a very, very fascinating Substack blog called Wordliness, Threads Connecting Geopolitics, where you can find a lot of really inspiring analysis of contemporary politics or contemporary system, international system, and deservedly so, this blog gained a lot of traction and a lot of audience recently, which I highly recommend you to see. And of course, we will link all the text and the blog in our description box. And I decided to do this discussion today because I think we have a series of texts by Nel which are connected with each other and which really create a kind of general vision of where we stand in today's system. I mean, three particular texts: The Bunker and the Void, An Introduction to a Silent Coup, The Fragmentationist's Grand Strategy, and the latest one called Multipolarity in a Multi-Layered Cage. And I hope we are able to at least partially, discuss very rich arguments that you put out in your texts. And I would like to start with the first one. I mean, chronologically, because the titles that I enlisted are in a chronological order. And by the way, just to mention and maybe remind our viewers that one of the texts which would not be an object of discussion today, which is called Munich in the Bunker, was already an object of my episodes, I think 2 months ago. So you could be already familiar with Nel's analysis. If you are not, please check it out because it's me talking, which is a bit less interesting, but it's about the text, which is very, very enlightening. So let's start with this idea of the bunker, because you say in the text, if I can summarize it very bluntly, that, well, we are approaching, or we are in the process of constructing or being led to the construction of a new architecture of West politics, which is no longer what it used to be or what it was supposed to be, which is the liberal democracies, basically. And it's being transformed into something like a bunker organized around the question of security. Could you please elaborate a little bit on the question of the relation between this bunker architecture or bunker system and the today's developments in the international politics?
Yes. Well, so thank you. So when I developed, well, I'm still developing this concept of the bunker state. It's a framework in development. But when I started developing it, let's say, I thought about, maybe not, but I have also a background in geography, like specifically urban and regional planning. And what I found, or what I had learned there, was that planning, states plan, governments, corporations, etc., So normally or usually in the world, well, I would say every country almost or basically, there always are plans. The government has a plan, the municipal, regional, etc., for organizing space, economy, etc., all kinds of spheres of life in society. And with the bunker state, what I thought was, okay, here, like I'm in Germany currently, but in Western Europe, there's currently happening something that you can see, or everyone that is there can see developing, which is that there is a militarization taking place. Like you can see in public space that things are changing, under construction, or likewise public infrastructure that is needed for citizens is deteriorating. But you also see in the media space, it's all about in the discourse about war preparations, etc., etc. So what I then thought is, okay, when this planning that was back then, specifically or mostly, but even before a little, mostly during the Cold War, but even before that, about serving, being about the common good, about the citizens, about even democratic processes to some extent. And during the Cold War, mostly because there was this systemic competition, and thus a capitalist system had to also find ways to increase social welfare and living standards and so on. And these plans also were often made in advance for 10 years into the future. They had a positive goal to improve life and all of that, and to progress technologically and all of that. And now we don't seem to have that, or rather, everything that has to do with society, with space, physical space, even with also media discourse, political discourse, everything now is turning around this idea of, yes, security, like securitization, but maybe in more blunt terms, it's about preparation for a type of war, whether it's large scale or low intensity, which I think at least right now it's more about that. So when I wrote the essay, for example, at the beginning, I wrote it's about the end of politics, and I mean in the sense that elections, not like all elections, at the level of the neighborhood or such, there is still this type of influence that one can have, but at least on the national level, very many it doesn't seem to matter which party or which government gets elected. There is a trajectory since around 15 years maybe in Western Europe that that things are getting dismantled, for example, social programs, the social welfare state, while at the same time the money that is diverted from taxes and so forth is going into armament, buying armament, developing armament, but also every type of infrastructure is being repurposed for what they call dual use, which means it's used for civilians, but it should also be used for military purposes. For example, trains and the train tracks, what else? The metro, hospitals even. So everything is now being put under this logic of militarization or securitization. And then the task of politicians actually isn't anymore to respond to the citizens in any way, but rather to sell, to be like actors, to sell these other plans and implement these different steps towards this, what I call bunker state. And these are also plans, but they don't come from from elected governments, but rather mostly from the military sphere, the military establishment, the security establishment as such, which means the military, it means think tanks that are related to foreign policy in every type of these countries, NATO countries and Western and European countries. And for example, in Germany, we have this plan that's called Plan or Operationsplan Deutschland, Operational Plan Germany, which basically says there they have a website. It's not public. I mean, not the plan is not public, but it has a website, and they openly admit, the Bundeswehr, the German military, will be coordinating and have a pre-planning role for political decisions of the government. And one could say, is this only happening in Germany? No. In the UK, we have this. It's called fusion doctrine. In the European Union, we have this too. There are also military planning committees. And they are basically advisors to the political sphere, but not only advisors, but pre-planning. I mean, I could even go back and say, the thing is, this is not, as I said, it's like NATO, it's Europe, which means many, many countries are doing this at the same time. And for example, I found, which also I quote in the Bunk and Avoid essay, I found a presentation slide, which was from a German military officer who was presenting in front of NATO members in Canada. I don't know, I don't remember how it was like called the round table or something like that. And he presented basically that Germany as a country would be adapting to the goals and aims of NATO, and that the European Union and its countries would do the same. And he even already in 2017, which means even before what was then used as an excuse with like, oh, it's because of Russia's the Russia-Ukraine war. Even before that, in 2017, in this PowerPoint slides, there was one where they basically said, yes, Germany is accepting to be the logistical hub for NATO, which means all the soldiers, all the military equipment will pass through to get to what they then even call I think they call it the eastern flank, not eastern flank,
that's
but almost.
Proud of Poland. We are eastern flank. That's legitimizes everything.
Yes, it's and this was in this presentation slide, which I find frightening. But the point is, they even in this presentation slide present then like a screenshot of one of these security establishment created future plans. I think it was like future plan 2030 or 40. I don't remember. I think it was 2040. Again, it's not publicly available to see and read what is in there. But again, many countries have these types of future plans, which are it's supposed to be from the government, but or let's say it like this: like every nowadays in the political establishment, many of the people there already have their biographies and careers so entangled with think tanks, with foundations, specifically transatlantic ones, or with even corporations in the technological sector, in the defense sector, etc. That's why I even termed like it's about a securitocracy, but we can call it whichever way we want. The point is, these types of plans were created, and like again, it's like from 20 years ago, and these plans project towards 2040, for example, and all in essentially to securitize everything. And if I say everything, also I mean everyone. So, which is another part of this, what I call a bunker state framework. Everyone, in the sense that the citizens, apart from not being able to now influence through elections or anything the trajectory of the development of the countries, the citizens now too becomes not about the bearer of rights and responsibilities, but is an object of security, which means it's is this person is safe, useful, or a threat. If he or she is a threat, he needs to be excluded, sanctioned, which has happened too already in Germany and in other European countries. And what else there is, which I just had in mind, yes, that if we think about this in terms of citizens being objects of security, and everything in a country being part of the securitization, also the country itself then isn't anymore about sovereignty, autonomy, but rather a node in one could say in a global theater of war, where every region and every country has their specific role and function. For example, Germany being the so-called logistical hub for the European theater of war. But other countries have their own special roles. And if one then looks through NATO reports and articles and all of that, one will find how they name the corridors, the flanks, and why and for what purpose. And then one can insinuate, okay, this means that this country is going to be the shield or the forward base or the whatever. And so this is also another part of this bunker state framework, in which I might add is one could say, oh, well, but in the US, what about it? Like the US is a country. Well, I would say that even the US itself is also just a node in this bunker state framework. At the end of the day, it's about the adaptation, or I would say it's about the adaptation of, if we want to call it like this, like I like to use world system theory about core, semi-periphery, and periphery. We could say this is about the adaptation of the imperial core to the changing world order in the sense of balances of power. That instead of the unipolar moment, more or less, of the 1990s, we now have a multipolar world order where there isn't any more this easy access to resources from all over the world, but because some countries have achieved to develop technologically, industrially, etc., much more, and thus were able to be more sovereign than others. This meant that the imperial core, specifically its ruling strata, didn't have the access anymore to these resources. And this bunker state framework then is basically also practically the acceptance of multipolarity. They say, oh, we are in the multipolar moment right now, and now we need to see, okay, what can we do to adapt to even their own, the consequences of their own policies from the 1990s, like the industrialization, financialization, and all of this, and to adapt to how the other countries react and not let them become too strong in a way, because that would then not necessarily end capitalism, in my opinion, but at least would make these Western European transatlantic ruling strata lose their social but also material power. So I would say like this is like the gist of it, yes, and is tied to today's developments.
Yeah, well, I think I wanted to ask you also, but because I think that there is one thing that proves that this is not a purely political phenomenon or political process, but also a kind of structure that survives a different political moments. Because I think that securitization is I don't know, Zygmunt Bauman, to just name a Polish philosopher, was writing about it back in the beginning of 2000s. But then it was about migration, the processes of using the migration phenomena, calling it a crisis and some kind of urgency to build or to start building an architecture of security, which would be technologically advanced, and it would slowly change the way we perceive what is actually a social stability, what is the role of the citizens. Just before the crisis of migration, so in quotation marks, we had a terrorism phenomenon. So we started the whole war on terror, which was also infinite in time and space, and allowed for a mass transformation of our social everyday life, so to speak. I remember, because I'm old enough to remember how people were actually opposed to this security checks on airports. It was very controversial at the time, and now it's just 10 times more advanced, and people accept it with no questions, no problems, and so on. So this is how we got used to a certain radical transformation of our environment because it was introduced under this guise of security. Then we had the COVID moment, which was also a big step into subsuming our social lives to various technologies of control. And now we have this war moment. My question would be, first, whether you agree with it or not, that this is the long duration of a certain pattern, but also what is the end point of it? Because now I think that I'm caught all the time into this thinking whether they are doing it for real, in the sense that we are really in a moment of preparation of a big war in Europe, or whether this is just another alibi to extract wealth, because this is another. But maybe I would ask about it later. Another aspect of it, and it's just a useful framework to accomplish a transformation which is needed for the elites, or for this international government, non-government, mixed structure of power. And the actual war is not really relevant. We can prolong the moment, exactly as in the Cold War, without actual fighting, because it brings benefits to accomplish this transformation. What are your thoughts about it? Are we really heading towards this confrontation, or we are just pretending to do it in order to secure this the perpetuation of this bunker state?
Yes, it's an excellent question. But first of all, I would say, to the very first question, I would say yes. I also noticed that, of course, the securitization process was one that didn't start like 20 years ago, but more or less 20 years ago, they really started for real with the planning, so to speak. And before that, I would say they were, one could say, strategizing also in papers and such, but it wasn't like, this is the plan, now let's implement it. And I would even say that this, this long durée that practically started in the 1990s, has to do with what we will then later see about this fragmentationist grand strategy, how I call it, which is again not really like a planned grand strategy, but like I think structurally emergent behavior from a combination of both the material structure of the world economy and the ideology of these people. But anyway, so this is for the first part, and also even that I would say, yes, the bunker state, like its development, also means a normalization. That's why I call it a silent coup, because nobody notices it. It's done through sanctions. It's done through plans that nobody really talks about, and it's done through, I would say, polarization. No, more like what I call like this dichotomous framework where you only see good, evil, barbarians, civilized, and so on. So in the case of Western Europe, for example, it's always, yes, the Russians are the evil ones, and we are the civilized ones, and so on. And this is also fomented, and I think another part of why or how it's being normalized. But okay, this is the first part. Now the other part, whether I think that this bunker state is about, okay, let's stay in this low intensity warfare, hybrid warfare, or is it about really a preparation for a great war, like the world wars? Well, I would argue, or what I have observed is, it's I would say it's like this. Generally, I think it is about long durée hybrid warfare, gray zone warfare, like in the Cold War, more or less, with crisis here and there, like for example now with Iran, but not. Let's say it is like this right now, and probably for the years to come, because indeed the other countries are so entangled in this global capitalist system with the US and the different European countries, like the imperial core, that neither one of them can just decouple, can just cut the strings without harming themselves terribly. So they are like in a stalemate of what I call like a mutual interdependence, equilibrium of vulnerability. They are, and for example, the US military itself acknowledges, or it thinks tanks and reports acknowledge this and say, well, it's a multipolar world. We cannot kick out, for example, China out of the South China Sea. I mean, they think like this, but and they cannot kick us out. So it's mutual denial, and we accept it. Tacitly, China and the US will accept this state of things, which means so long as this entanglement is there, and no country, and I wouldn't say a single country, I would say it would need to be like many countries, enough countries that a qualitative shift could happen that create like alternative structures of finance, of regulations and laws and all this. Only then would, if this happens, then I would say yes, the ruling elites of the Western or transatlantic countries and so on would then want to engage in a greater war, because this would be the moment of a threat. But even now, with this, what I think is more like this gray zone warfare, that they say all domains, everywhere and every time, I would say it's about also preparing for a greater war, but only in the case that some kind of disaster, red line or black swan event, etc., happens. If not, this other thing, this potential development of like non-capitalist world. So I think like right now they accept the status quo. Of course, they also want to entrench and not lose the levers of power they still have, like the financial markets, the rating agencies, the dollar dominance, which is still there, bilateral agreements, all of this. As long as they have this and even are able to somehow keep the dominance there and even expand, as long as this is there, the gray zone and hybrid warfare will keep being the way it is. I would say only if they really feel like here comes an existential threat would they engage in like a much greater war. This is my assessment. But of course, anything can happen. But at least like this, I would say it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think about the question of time in this context, because I think that in a sense this you are using a very nice phrase, mutual assured denial, which is like a new version of very famous mutual assured destruction. I think that we could say that part of this mutual assured denial is that, for example, United States are and are not at war with Russia at the same time. The latest developments in Petersburg, you have the same day almost the drone attack, which is obviously made thanks to the technology which is shared by United States, Ukraine attack in Petersburg, and at the same time the signing of some common project between Russia and the United States about the tunnel or whatever. So you have a kind of cooperation and war at the same time. And I think that I actually watched the part of media discussion with Putin, and he said we have a lot of time. So I thought it's funny, because it's as if both sides are waiting, because the Americans wait until Russia, Iran, and China would bleed out, and the other side is waiting until this United States hegemony is really, really broken. And when you say that if the coupling is finally accomplished, that's the most dangerous moment, because that's a moment in which they are disconnected. Both sides are disconnected to such an extent that they can actually engage into a war. But I would say, maybe it's a stupid observation, but I would say, but in this case, it's already over, because the purpose of the war for United States is to keep the situation of imbalance as long as possible. When there is an actual architecture which is parallel to
Yes.
dollar domination, and that's over. I mean, the war didn't even started, and it's already done, because the whole system is, then United States is just a very, very indebted country with overextension, which is just a monument to its former greatness, but the actual force is no longer there. But to accomplish it, they have to wait in such a manner to keep this in balance. And the other side also has to wait long enough in order to slowly but steadily build an architecture which would replace it. And that's an interesting phenomenon, because it's as if this kind of, I don't know how to say it, it's like a war of Schrödinger, which is there and it's not there at the same time, is beneficial for both sides in at least in their own imagination, perhaps, or in their own strategy.
Yes, I would.
That's an optimistic version, of course. Because, I mean, it's not optimistic per se, but it's optimistic in a sense we are going to live for some more time still, at least in Poland, because Poland is a real candidate for the next great nation facing the evil.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I agree, sadly, but I would add that it's. I mean, when, for example, when the Russian president says we have time, or let's say it like this, I think when the US is doing this like kind of waiting game with this, we are, well, actually in their reports of the US Army, they say they are at war, multi-domain, everywhere, every time. So at least they admit this, but in documents that nobody reads. So, but anyway, the point being is that not only the US, but let's say the US-led ruling strata, or capitalist, if we want to call them, they have the idea that, yes, they want to bleed out, which means at the end of the day, they do hope that in this long-duration warfare, they will manage to either capture, in a way, the elites of these other countries, China, Iran, or Russia, or indeed physically and infrastructurally destroy these countries or parts of it, and being able to capture this. So I think this is like, even though they themselves write, we are in a situation of mutually assured denial, because those are not my words, these are actually from a report from the Brookings Institution, but I found them so interesting, I put them there. So if they think like this, that okay, we are here in the multipolar world, and we are in such a situation where at the moment we only can have mutually assured denial. They do this, yes, but at the same time, I think they do have always in the back of their mind that with these types of hybrid and gray zone warfare operations, they will eventually, in some way or another, capture these countries into the sphere, or more into the sphere, because at the end of the day, every one of these countries is in some way or another entangled in the global capitalist economy, and in the different, like what they call the cage, like the different structures that the Western ruling structures still control and still have the power over. And on the other hand, I would say that Russia or China, for example, they cannot, or I don't know if they see it like this or not, I really don't, but I don't think it's about waiting till the US fragments or crumbles or whatever, because the US, again, in my view, as I understand it, is also just a node in this grand theater of war, and it's more about the mostly, not only, but mostly transatlantic ruling strata that, as I said, have these levels of power, which are in the financial and corporate and law world spheres, of the world, and they most often have many passports and all of that. So if something happens to the US, to its citizens mostly, they won't care. Again,
Oh,
they
yeah.
won't care if something happens to the different European countries. And I guess that Russia and China know this too. And that the other thing about these Russia and China individually, but even the three of them, US, China, and Russia, having trade deals and all of this, it shows maybe on the one hand that they try to bargain with the US, or that they try to appease a part of their own elite that do want to be part of the global market economy and much more, and want to appease them to not lose their power and then for real have to be co-opted by the US and Europe and so on. So, and then at the end of the day, at least as far as I have seen and observed, I mean, the BRICS, for example, and so on, they can build alternative infrastructures, but these are not, as I view them, they are not about having alternative logics, but again, only about trying to bargain to have more room and a bit more sovereignty in the global market economy and not do something different. And again, as long as this is happening, I think the US, the imperial core, etc., they can accept in quotation marks, because again, they will continue with all of this hybrid warfare. So I would say that it's like, as you say, kind of a Schrödinger's war, not at war, and at the same time we are at war, but it's really, and which this is why in my last essay I talk about elite competitive multipolarity. It's more about the upper strata of each society, each country, than about the citizens and constituents themselves having any influence on what is going on right now, at least how I am seeing it.
Yeah, I think we naturally enter into the question of fragmentationist strategy, because you are also an author of a text, or we should say two-part longer essay. It's not just a text online, but a very long argumentation. And I think that this is a very brilliant text in which I really understood, I mean, something which I almost got, but sometimes, you know, when you read something, you just have this moment of enlightenment that, yeah, it's so clear now. And because I think that for most of people, at least in Poland, with which I happen to have debates, which are very rare, because, as you say, in the bunker we don't need any debates, we don't need any dissent or any kind of controversy. We just blindly accept the tone which is coming from above. But if I do, I have this impression that really people are unable to understand that we are not talking about a chessboard which is plain. You know, in which there are certain actors and they have the same share of the chessboard. They have the same abilities, the same legality, authority, and so on. They just don't understand, if they, for example, discuss China, Iran, and so on, that what is actually that these countries face and what they are dealing with. And that if you want to evaluate their politics, you have to kind of combine the regular observations with the context in which these things happen. Because normally they would say, oh, but this is not democratic, this is not, it's just as if this, you know, the positions of these countries were exactly the same as the imperial core and, you know, the traditionally capitalist states and so on, and not, for example, in the case of China, you know, a country which, like a half century ago, was still the poorest one in the world. So this is really a kind of country which is slowly, or sometimes very dynamically, trying to leave the status of a pariah. Now, of course, it's science fiction when we talk about China like that, but it's just a recent phenomenon that they are such a developing economy and so on. And in your text, you just show this, that the main strategy of imperial core, the countries, especially like United States and the cluster of their allies, their strategy is just to fragment every country which is big enough and resilient enough and socially cohesive enough to even potentially in the future become a competitor. And that's a very enlightening thing. And I wanted to ask you to just develop about a little bit this logic, how it's constructed and what are the basic elements of this strategy, because you call it a grand strategy, which sounds like a pre-planned, ideologically founded strategy, which is, slightly different in your take, but still, it's something that is an overall, all-encompassing logic in which particular events and processes are, embedded. Oh, this is the word I was looking for.
Yes. So, with the fragmentationist grand strategy, what I was, what I found, not only me, but I think it's more like this. Like since I had this question, okay, starting in the 1990s with the fall of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union and socialist republics, etc. Why didn't NATO dissolve? And I, this was my question. I think many people ask themselves this. And this was the starting point for this idea of the fragmentationist grand strategy, because then I found these texts and reports and papers and so on from the 1990s, where basically with NATO specifically there were these discussions that we cannot disband, because basically all the other countries that potentially had the potential to become autonomous and then not easily controllable, or we can't influence them easily. And therefore we do still need NATO to keep them in check, to contain them, etc. And not only this, it was also about, for example, the different European countries, that they themselves wouldn't, when NATO dissolves, become their own pole in the world, their own more autonomous, that they themselves wouldn't become autonomous, but still be in the orbit of influence of the US specifically. And therefore then the NATO expansion with the Baltic countries, but also some Eastern Central European countries, was about choosing these ones because their elites, their ruling strata, had more connection to the US than the other Central or Western European countries like Germany and France and so on. And this was the idea. If we expand NATO, then we also can capture Europe. So in the case of Europe, with all these more tiny or little in comparison to these other countries, it was about, okay, we need to stop them consolidating in the way they want. But for the other countries like China and Russia, it was about we need then the structure of NATO, so we can not lose our power to influence. Because then I found, I think it was in Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, there he had a sentence where he said, the US only has the ability for shallow hegemony. They can only on a surface level influence other countries. But there are countries that are territorially way too big and therefore have too many resources, and furthermore they have a historical memory of having had another type of structure or role in the world. For example, in the case of Russia, they also had technological, scientific, etc. knowledge from the Soviet Union years, and also, of course, the memory of a possibility towards socialism and all of this. So just the possibility, and even in Iran, they said, okay, they have also a memory of being a stronger type of country, and they are also their strategic position in the world is also too important, and we cannot shallowly influence them or superficially influence them. So we need, or not, they didn't say they need anything, but I thought, okay, if they can't, because these countries are too big, influence them, this in turn means they will want to fragment them, these countries territorially. But overall, I would think it's also about fragmenting the surroundings. It's about fragmenting the supply chains, the material flows towards them or outwards, that go outwards. And then I found another sociology paper about, fragmentation is political power, and this was also interesting because there the researchers said, okay, there are several steps how such a country is fragmented, and he was kind of describing it as it was a natural process, almost like without any interference from outside. But he basically said, yeah, okay, what needs to be done is to create economic, financial crisis in the country. Furthermore, it needs to be geopolitically isolated, which means its neighbors need to be hostile or more, at least not care what happens to this country. Then there needs to be, well, then if the financial and economic crisis happens, this means that the central government will lose the capacity to pay the security and defense and police and all of this. And if this happens, then the different if there are ethnic or things like this tensions, these can be exploited, and then fragmentation can happen. And that this only has been stopped by countries that have were able to develop a very strong social cohesion and political organization in their countries. That this is what has saved, like China, for example, and I would say right now Iran still. So, or Cuba is also still there. So there are many countries that do have this. But the point being is that, or what I argue in this essays, is that this is not like, again, even Brzezinski didn't say, oh, because we cannot influence these grand territorial countries, we need to fragment them. But rather, I thought, okay, this is more like a structural emergent behavior pattern, as I call it. Because the structure is about the US, or the US being the imperial core mostly, its ruling strata. And they have a certain type of ideology, which is, I say, or I think it comes mostly from when capitalism developed, and then colonization and so on, which is about like needing to extract resources from everywhere and needing to maintain like the status and saying this hierarchical version of the world and the order and so on needs to be like this, and they try to justify it to themselves and to others. And if we combine all of this, like if we understand that in their worldview there's just no space for equality, for example, and like the structures they have already created, military and economic structures, also don't have like this idea of being more equal or behaving more peacefully, then it is only logical that in a moment when the US, but also Europe, etc., are in the industrialized version of themselves and so on, and that they will need a strategy, or it will use a pattern of behavior that that is apt for these conditions, and not because they planned it like this, but because it's just logical. if they don't have these means of just creating a big armaments industry in their own countries anymore, and if they can't invade a country and occupy it anymore, then how do they keep the control? By fragmenting everything, from societies to energies flows to resources to markets. This is the idea behind this, what I then call fragmentationist grand strategy, that this is simply the adaptation in the operational military way of what they want to do, but not in a way like, oh, they planned it because they have a conspiracy there, but rather like this is simply the way their worldview historically has grown, and the structures that have been already created, but not only from the US, also from the British and from all the other European countries. It only makes sense that this would happen. There's just no other way, which then would lead us to the other essay about multipolarity, about, okay, and when does then an empire even fall? When does it end? But that's the idea.
No, but I also understood, because this practice of fragmentation, which became, as you said, a kind of habit almost. I think it could be also understood in a class terms, because it's a kind of class warfare in international politics, and also it has this particular quality that you don't have to be conscious of your class to behave accordingly to your class position. This is how it works. That it kind of precedes your individual or even collective conscience. You are in a class war even before you realize it. But I think that this could be a kind of clash between two stratas or two poles of capitalist class. The West and non-West capitalist class. But I also understood to what extent this fragmentation as a strategy or as a practice went together with an ideology of a totally reversed signification, which the best summary of it is, decolonize Russia. This is, this actually the process of fragmentation of your potential rival is it's decolonization. It's this noble endeavor to assure and again another instrumentalized concept in this process is, of course, the right to self-determination. This is a United States as a guarantor of self-determination of nations is the biggest joke you can imagine. It's like, how on earth people really came up with this, but it works, because this has this left-ish flavor that people just kind of accept unconsciously, or I don't know how, but you are not siding with imperial core. You are siding with the process of emancipation. And of course, anyone who knows anything about what happened in Ukraine in the last 14 years knows it's nonsense. It's just incredible. But the idea is there, and how this decolonization happens. It happens through allowing these local small communities that are subsumed to this autocracy, imperial structures of big federations to emancipate themselves. And this is exactly how you sell this. This is how it happened in Yugoslavia was a bit different, because they still didn't know how to sell it properly in the decolonization stuff. But I remember that, that was a moment in which everyone was living as if Bosnia is some kind of, a gold mountain. It's like everything Bosnian is just great by definition. Everything started and will finish in Bosnia. Like, it's just a universal ideal. And this is exactly in order to dismantle structures that could actually secure the well-being of the societies, and subsume, you use the term absorb, this whole territories to the rule of the capital most of the time. So I think this is a really dramatic clash between what happens and how it's narrated. It's and this is a quagmire in which a lot of people got lost, including, by the way, leftists that still have this theory of multiple imperialism. If Yugoslavia is not ready to dismantle, it means it's a project of Greater Serbia. It's just
and
the exact 180% reversal of the reality. Because it's amazing. It's you produce. And last thing, but not unimportant, this is how you also produce danger, because, look, there is this incredible incarnation of Hitler. His name is Milosevic, and if he's not stopped, he's going to kill all the people, all his neighbors, and he will go further. And so it's you have a lot of gains with one reversal. It's incredible.
Yes. I agree. Actually, this is quite important point, which I would say in the case of what I call the bunker state framework. I talk about this dichotomous ideology, which separates much between, for example, good and evil, black, white, or civilized and barbarian, and so on.
Garden and jungle.
Yeah, exactly, garden and jungle. But what I find quite interesting, which I didn't talk about in this essay, in a recent note I did, but in this essay I didn't, is similar to what you are saying. Actually, the process of this, what we could call a silent coup, this a silent transformation, we was able to transform societies and space and so on, because it mostly came through the cloak of social democrats, of green parties that use a more liberal, cosmopolitan, etc. language. And they were able to sell that these types of militarizations needed to be done because, well, there is Russia, there's Putin, who is like Hitler, Russia is an empire, etc., all of this. Which is then dangerous because it dismantles the little that was left of any kind of progressive or left movements. It dismantles it because then many actually do accept these narratives. And the next step, I would argue, might be for some countries, of course I cannot assure it, to then radicalize, specifically if these types of warfare operations get any more intense, to radicalize people in the way that, for example, more far-right parties come to power, and then this the ideologization, the casting the other as the devil, etc., as the ultimate evil, and oneself as the ultimate good, and so on, will be the tool through which then people will be motivated to endure hardship, to endure militarization, and even maybe to become soldiers or stuff like this themselves. So I think this might be the trajectory, and I would even say that through the Trump administration, and they talk about not only the administration, but the people surrounding it, with even the tech corporations like Palantir and so on. They talk lately much about civilization, European or Western civilization, and just juxtaposing it with others, say, basically, even they don't say it like this, but they say we have the better values, even like in the Marco Rubio speech where he said, wasn't colonization good? Wasn't stuff like this. And so they are normalizing this type of ideology, and I think it might be like, now that the cosmopolitan, more liberal parts of the ruling strata have normalized securitization, militarization, and so forth, now these part of the ruling strata can come and radicalize the population more. I think this might be like a trajectory that is in motion. I hope not, but it seems like it.
No, because if it's a very good point, I think, because if the liberals and Greens and leftists brought this militarization into the center, now who is going to oppose it? Anyone who opposes it is a Russian agent, and and some suspicious, probable infiltrator. So who is going to take this position? Normally, that would be a leftist socialist party or movement or group, but there is none. None of those are visible in Europe. At least I don't know. Maybe I don't know about any place, but in Poland you just don't have it. There is no organized left. You have left which is more pro-NATO than anything else. And I think in Germany it's almost similar, and so on and so forth. So even in France, I think they managed to kind of eradicate this opposition to capitalist transformations, and also through the securitization corridor, so to speak. So I think that now it's a deadlock. You don't have anything, just the forces which would perpetuate and radicalize the status quo. That there is nothing which is actually slowing it down, at least here, I think. But maybe that's a good point to go to your last essay, because it's exactly about the question which I think is a much talked about debate or problem, but still I think lacks clarification, which I think you bring, and it's a very useful framework that you present, because it's a question of unipolar, multipolar world, which in a sense became a kind of lingua franca for any geopolitical analysis and so on. Maybe not. In Poland, for example, the mainstream is still in the la-la land of democracy fighting authoritarianism. They don't just get anything else. They just still in deep 90s. But on the margins, it already started, and it's very much present as a point of discussion. So we could say that even in Poland, this kind of debates happen. But then comes the question, which for me personally is a very interesting and crucial one, because I was thinking today while preparing for this talk, and I just told myself that as far as analysis is concerned, the change between unipolar system towards multipolar system, it would be still interesting as a newest contradiction in capitalism, let's say. But for a human being or a citizen, I'm interested in the question whether that can bring some change, in a sense that whether multipolarity would be in any sense a global order of, I don't know, maybe not total, but relatively less unjust, unequal, extractive, violent, and so on. This is the question, because otherwise, who cares? I don't see a point in being really moralistic about choice between national oligarchies. That's, okay, we can feel more comfortable with our proper ones, but that's not this important. So, I think here you just introduce a very useful distinction between two, versions or possibilities of developing this multipolar world, which is, as you say, already here. It's not a question whether it comes, but it's coming, and it's already evolving. One is the anti-imperialist multipolarity, and the other is you call it elite competitive multipolarity. And I wanted to ask you whether this is not also a question. Of course, I would ask you to define this distinction a little bit, but then I would like to know whether this is not a question actually, whether the capitalism is about to stumble upon something else, or is it just another moment of a contradiction crisis which would just rejuvenate and regenerate capitalist system as it used to be accounted for, that capitalism is developing through contradictions, crises, and so on. So we will just have to go through some war or some deep crisis in economy, and then the cycle would restart. So I think this is, at least for me, the stake of all this discussion.
Yes. So those are interesting questions. So actually, I bring it up because I think it makes more clear why I even came up with the distinction. I have noticed that much in the let's call it alternative media space, there came up more and more like analysis and talks and takes and so on, where it was like, I don't know, Iran, Russia, China wins, the US loses, I don't know, the US has fallen, definitely, 100%. So things like that. And I was like, why were they saying this? But then I think it is because many people are thinking about, yes, multipolarity as like the ultimate goal and ultimate good, and also hegemony, like this some like powerful concept of control. And if the US as a country doesn't have the hegemony, the global hegemony anymore, and if the unipolar moment is over, doesn't then this automatically mean that the world will be more peaceful, for example, which is always brought about with this idea of the Westphalian order, like balance of power and so on. And I heard it's understandable to think this way, but in my conceptualization of these things, I'm thinking, okay, but if there is a multipolar world, but we still have the same infrastructure of finance, monetary infrastructure, of regulations, of the market, the US led ruling stratas, I call them, are still there within these infrastructures, and they are still, even though not in like they can't, and they admit they can't win against Iran, China, and Russia, even though they cannot do this at the moment, they are still, in quotation marks, because I do not like to use the term, but winning in the sense of capturing other countries around the world. For example, because I know more about this region, but in Latin America, so many countries at the moment in the last 2 years have gone from left or progressive governments towards right-wing or very right-wing governments that are opening up the countries to be extracted, their resources, their labor, by cutting the labor rights to a terrible minimum. I mean, one cannot call them labor rights. And the securitization there by locking people up, and all of this is going on too. So if I see all these developments, and then just because the US as a country is unable to militarily win against these other countries, this means that this will be a more peaceful and more just world. I don't see it. So this is why I said, okay, this means that multipolarity itself, of course, cannot be just because it's multipolar an ultimate good. So in what kind of multipolarity type are we? Then there must be different. And what I then also thought about is many analysts and commentators that I watch or read or listen are anti-imperial, let's say anti-imperialist in their outlook. And then I think, yes, but just because these things are happening, it doesn't mean that the imperialist structure of the world has come to an end or will come to an end soon. Not at all. Again, as long as all these countries in the world, including Russia and China, take part in these very important financial and monetary and legal and market frameworks, as long as they do that and don't try to build alternative infrastructures that also work in a different way, not with the extractive and capitalist hierarchical logic, but another logic. As long as this doesn't happen, the US-led ruling strata, capital, and so on will keep on being there, will be surviving. And again, the US themselves in their reports and think tanks and so on, they notice, they accept this, they say, okay, let's have this multipolar world. We will be we will be in exchange with all these countries, but we will be still in a hybrid warfare with everyone too all the time, because we don't want to lose everything. So that's why I say I use the term elite competitive, because I think that or not I think I observed that as long as this is not about changing, like, let's say, the capitalist structure, imperialist structure of the countries, the world's building alternative infrastructures, this means it is basically what is happening right now is between the different ruling stratas of the different countries of the world, and not for the benefit of its citizens. And anti-imperial multipolarity I call like another type, which would be the version where maybe, for example, the market economy takes a backseat, and we organize the economy in the different countries, maybe in the world or regionally, more on social spheres. And what was the other one? A state, like the state and the social sphere are more dominant than the market sphere. And then the countries also are indeed more sovereign and can exchange and trade and whatever on a more equal basis. So this would be, in my view, like real anti-imperial multipolarity. But right now, we are in a world, as we said at the beginning, where we have Schrödinger's war, where the elites are like trading and signing agreements, making investments, even though they are also, mostly the US and Europe and so on, attacking China, Russia, Iran, and other countries. And their elites still are making the deals, like what is happening here. So this is why I call it like this. And another reason why I call it elite competitive is because these structures that are being built, like BRICS, like the Belt and Road Initiative, and all of these are structures that are also about integrating themselves into the world economy on better terms. But still, it's just about finding their own room and space, even spheres of influence, one could say, but not about changing the logic of how all this works, not trying to build, in my view, like a positive or different future. There is, and then I say there is no positive shared goal, no project. For example, there's much talk lately, maybe since the late 1990s, about civilizations, mostly coming from China, but maybe also from China and Russia. Not only, I mean, I have seen it in other countries too. And I think it isn't wrong, I mean, to say history and all of this, of course, exists. But it is a framework that doesn't allow, for example, for solidarity. It's a discursive framework. It doesn't allow for solidarity, for real solidarity and cooperation between the different countries, peoples, for example. It doesn't allow to build trust, and instead it's just, again, about communiques, about forums, about conferences. It's not about building like mass organizations of, I don't know, let's exchange our workers, learning different trades in this and that country, or students, pupils. I mean, there are student exchanges, but between, for example, Russia and China, not in a more transnational manner, and also not with a shared horizon and goal. So in this manner, I see it's not like conductive to change the current status quo, and I don't think it will lead to a more peaceful world, because again, as long as the let's call them different capitalist classes have this logic, they will try to find where they can extract recurses. And as you say, there's these contradictions and crises and means or methods to induce crisis that then allow, for example, for capitalism to more or less reconfigure itself. And I would say partly that maybe this is being done in a very slow and again silent manner. For example, it's tried, there is an attempt to do this in Gaza, I would say, for example, to destroy it completely in order to then build, but not only build buildings, but also capture it into financial, monetary, digital, and all of these type of infrastructures. I think they want to do this with many other countries. I don't know, maybe, for example, if this will happen to Argentina, but not in destroying the buildings, but yes, in capturing more and more into these new technological, financial hybrid structures. So I think it's this is why I do this differentiation. Because as long as we don't try to imagine or don't try to understand if multipolarity in itself is just good, but we want something good, and then ask ourselves, what actually do we as humanity, as peoples, maybe in this or that country want, we won't be able to make sense of what is happening right now, and then we won't be able to also resist when something bad, well, more terrible happens. For example, if this idea of the bunker state concept becomes more radicalized because we didn't understand the moment. So this is the idea behind it.
Yeah, I think just the point about this civilization, because I liked a lot your point about the fact that this discourse of civilization is, in a sense, a way not to talk about class divisions, because civilization could mean anything and nothing. What does this mean? Civilization could be very horrible for working class. Civilization could be very egalitarian, whatever. But I always treated this idea, because I think that both Russia and China intellectually developed these ideas of civilizational states. And I always treated it as a kind of response to this idea of fragmentation. How to build a cohesion of a country which is big, differentiated, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and so on. You have to find a formula, to unify, which would be elastic enough not to be a dictatorial hierarchy of, I don't know, one ethnicity, dominating all the others, or one religion. I think that both of these states, more or less, and for the good or for the worse of the population, tried to construct this kind of. If we talk about Russian nationalism, I think that we have to understand that this nationalism is an attempt to keep together the very, very, dispersed geographically, religiously, socially infrastructure. But at the same time, it's a way to keep an oligarchic economic model, because they still didn't throw it away. It's the Xi Jinping is having a big war with his oligarchs, at least officially. But in Russia, it's still a part of this Bonapartist, construction in which you don't really talk about class divisions. You don't really kind of address that, okay, this civilization is a way to create a platform for all these different collectives. But what is the idea of actually constructing a state? This is a crucial point in my sense, because that would predetermine how this multipolarity would be constructed, whether it would be a new version of a shining city on the hill, just in a different location, or whether it could be something similar to the ideas of emancipation, which I kind of find still the only option, out of a barbarism. So I think this is, and the other point, I'm curious what would you say, because I agree, and probably we hear the same or partly the same podcasts and commentators, but I would say that that there is this idea of criticizing globalism. What is the problem in today's capitalism is the global capitalism. But what is the alternative? The alternative is still a capitalism, which is just differently reorganized. It doesn't solve the core problem, because I think we are in an imperialist stage because of how capitalism works. That's not my idea. That's obvious for any Marxist. So the idea to criticize globalism and believe that if only those transnational elites, which means American elites or Western elites, are gone, we are free to do whatever we want. That's not how it works, I think.
Yes. I mean, to the first point, I agree. Like the civilization discourse is, of course, also an answer to this fragmentationist strategy. But at the same time, it is also a convenient way to not engage with the working classes, so to speak, subaltern classes, and so on. And here, I would even add that, or what I have found quite frequently, is that nowadays, often within many like Marxist, anti-imperial, etc. analysis, I find that I see from media analysts, commentators, and so on, they are, which I think is like related to the civilization idea, are focusing on countries or like the state's leaders, etc. But not anymore on doing the analysis of class analysis, like social group analysis of each country, and understanding, okay, how is this one related to this other's ruling strata's country, etc. It's all about, is this or that country winning or losing? And thus class analysis doesn't exist anymore. It is only now applied almost exclusively to European countries or the US, in order to say, look, they are declining and falling and everything will be all right. So it's a weird way. Well, I don't want to say weird, but like it's not it is not an analysis that I would say. It's like the geopolitical framework has subsumed like the framework of, for example, materialist or Marxist class analysis. And I think this should be highlighted more in these different spaces, because otherwise, again, we will maybe see things changing, but not in the direction that many had hoped for. And then the other thing about globalists, and then if they are gone, isn't everything better? Well, first of all, I would say I'm not really sure how they can be like gone, like unless
no, that's the other that's the other fight.
Unless
they are not going to evaporate just like
like unless the like this infrastructure, imperialist capitalist exactly infrastructure is changed. Only then would it be gone, because this group would then lose the source of its material and social and so on power. But other than that, there is no way. This is what I always say when I say talk about how elections right now, and I'm not saying no one should try, but are very hard to change things in, for example, in diverse European countries. Because even if a party comes to power that is more classically, leftist, all these structures that they will have to control or influence are still the same structures that are embedded in the global capitalist and transatlantic, etc. economy. So it's not like that then they can do much. In fact, they will be probably sabotaged anyway, somehow. And this is why I say I don't think... So I agree with you. It's not like we can just make this class disappear. Like it's like it doesn't work that easily. Let's say that easily. Like there is hard work to be done, and as you also mentioned, like in Europe, there isn't, or all the leftist movements that there exist are very either dispersed or very small, etc., but not organized, exactly because on the one hand there was this cooptation maybe by these more liberal frameworks. On the other hand, because the far right, more conservative types have since some years now, maybe since like 20 years, started building organization, and not only in countries, but even regional and global organizations and infrastructure. And the others didn't, or let themselves be blinded by these others, liberal cosmopolitan classes, etc. So it looks bleak, and I'm not hopeless, because I try to write these essays and so on to say, look, here's something that needs to be done. And what's more, I often find it when I see these podcasts or articles and all of that, it's almost like there is this notion of let's just sit and wait and watch and cheer on our team, which is, I don't know, Russia and China and Iran and so on. And that's all, because if they win, whatever that means, then the world will be good. Instead of saying, yeah, we need to do our part in every country, not only in the imperial core countries, but even in all over the world, and understand what is happening and organize, because the other side in every country has been organizing for some time now. So
I'm just a small point about elections, that I don't know if that happens in Germany as well, but in Poland, every new election, I also think they change nothing. If they would change anything, they would be forbidden. But they change really very, very. I mean, they are the changes are indistinguishable most of the time. But each election comes with the slogan that this is the ultimate choice. You know, this is the last hope. It depends on the side. For the more right wing, that's, you know, the last bastion of national identity, sovereignty, and so on. For the more liberal, it's the last bastion to defend democracy, you know, against autocracy, right wing populism, and so on and so on. But the less elections really change in society, the more they are hyped up as kind of, you know, cosmic clash, you know. It's like this, it's like. But the last question I would like to ask, because we started with the bunker, and I think we are kind of approaching it again, because you know, just to focus on this, let's say, anti-imperialist side, which is also, and we know it also through the notion of fragmentationist strategy, they are under siege. And what happens if you are under siege by this imperialist core? You are getting more and more controlled, unified. The question of sovereignty and security becomes crucial. Of course, on the other side, that would be presented as a proof that you are, totalitarian and you repress your own population and so on and so forth. But still, that creates as well a kind of bunker, or possibly a kind of bunker structure, you know. And the question is how to avoid this multipolarity of bunkers in the end, because naturally the logic of the conflict could bring it about.
Yes, yeah, that's a good question, and I think I got a similar comment recently, and actually it's logical, because, as you say, if one is constantly under siege, under attack, etc., then there is a tendency normally to try try to strengthen the cohesion, the security, and all of this. And then one could say, isn't this also like a bunkerization of the every country that is in such a position? Yeah, well, I would say it very much depends on the I would say it depends on the country's histories and political traditions. I wouldn't say that every country would fall, let's say, fall into this dynamic. It depends very much because, for example, I would actually say that within all these, or in many, many Latin American countries that are right now have changed from left-wing to right-wing governments, it's exactly because they have rather like a political culture that is very about saying, well, from the leftist and progressive side, like, no, we are not dictatorial at all, so say what you want, the media is absolutely free, we won't ban anything at all, censor no one and nobody, nothing. And then also they seek more, for example, class collaboration, or they don't touch or try to hit the oligarchic structures so much oftentimes because of the same reason, or very, very slowly. So I think it really depends on the historical political culture, whether such a thing can develop for such countries that are, we could say, under siege. Others might be, but I don't want to speculate because I'm not that an expert on, let's say, for example, Russia, China, or Iran, whether they have more a culture of trying to censor or steer the discourse, etc., more in one direction. So I don't want to speculate there, but at least from the experience of Latin America, I would say it depends really on the modern historical political culture, whether this will happen or not. And the other thing is, when I say bunker state framework, I often mean exactly what I also mean when I say the empire is not a country. The bunker state, in my view or in my conceptualization, is also not a country. Rather, the bunker state is basically the adaptive form, the new adaptive form of this imperialist core. And thus, this would just for the other countries, this would maybe then only happen if they somehow manage to really cooperate together and build real alliances of defense, even, and military, and so on. And somehow I think this is not the case, exactly because everybody is so entangled with the US, for example, US economy and so on, that everybody's trying to hedge or look and see what the other part or the other country, even if it is a potential ally, is doing or is not doing. At least this is how I have observed it, and thus I would say it's not. I don't think that this bunkerization would happen with the countries under siege. Maybe one could say what could happen is, yes, maybe more militarization, securitization within the national countries, but this then I would call in a different manner again, because the idea of the bunkers, it's more about a network, not this imperial form that doesn't care anymore about its citizens at all. Everything is just about preparations for war, hybrid warfare, and so on.
Okay, Nel, thank you very much. We are past 1 hour and a half, which was our idea. So, Nel Bonilla, thank you very much for coming on the show. I think it was a wonderful discussion, and I'm curious about your further publications and intellectual endeavors. I hope it's not the last time we see each other on the podcast. It's just a debut, and we will see each other again. And everyone watching us now, check out in the description box the Substack blog and read the text we were discussing today and all the others, because the profit would be yours and they are all for free, so you can benefit freely from Nel's ideas. Thanks very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.